dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria. You are listening to Brothers of the Serpent podcast.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, angels and demons, and monsters and serpents, to Brothers of the Serpent podcast, coming to you on our emergency backup podcast day Thursday in the newly cooled tangent cube of science.
Climate change!
We got an amazing climate change system up here, high atop the Everest Plateau, amidst these dusty bones from an ancient seabed.
That's right.
Yep.
I'd like to thank Drew for coming out and pulling a vacuum on our climate change box.
Yeah, so this thing is, tell us about this thing.
It's I always get these backwards. It's like a split mini or mini split.
Mini split, it's one of those.
And yeah, it's running right now, and it's great. It's nice and cold in here.
Yeah. Yeah, so previous to this, we had a shitty window unit.
Yeah.
That when it came on, it was like, and we couldn't really use it, which we've talked about before.
Yep.
So,
created the format for the show.
Yeah.
And that's all we needed it for, and now it's out in the yard.
Right. Thanks, window unit.
Yeah. So, this one's got a unit outside, and actually the outside portion of it is also very quiet.
Yeah, it's pretty quiet. Yeah.
You go back around there, and you can't hardly tell.
Yeah.
So
we were able to get that and other goodies, in part thanks to the donations of you guys, which always helps. Thank you so much. Helps keep the lights on in here and keep it cool, because we are in Texas where it is hot in the summer.
Yep.
So we really appreciate that, guys. All your donations definitely help out, keep this podcast going, keep us going, and send us straight to pyramids. Coolly.
Yeah.
Very cool.
I also have a special gift for maybe 72 individuals who are maybe our best supporters.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. A special snakebro.com forwarding email.
Ah, there you go. There you go.
So
swag, folks.
that's right. We're gonna
Join the Snake Force.
We're gonna start handing them out to you know who you are, special people.
That's right.
Whatever you want at snakebro.com is your forwarding email address.
That's awesome.
To whatever email address you want to give us.
Yeah. That would be cool. Join the Snake Force.
That's right.
So this is a watcherless show on our emergency backup podcast day Thursday.
Yep.
Unfortunately, yeah.
I was just checking, making sure.
Yeah, it does work.
I had to move the whole studio out of the tangent cube, and I just moved it back in. So,
Yeah.
just got to check that
You're good.
they work.
All the buttons work.
Hell no.
So yeah, we don't have the watcher. Unfortunately, he couldn't join us. We were unable to do it on our. So let's see. I don't know how much we've talked about this, but for a long time, our regular podcasting schedule was Tuesday nights, which meant that the podcast was published around usually by midnight-ish Tuesday night / Wednesday morning. But then the watcher got a new job, and he's an EMT, and EMT schedules are pretty tough.
Yeah.
They work 24s. It's a lot like think firemen, they stay in the fire station. So he's on call basically in the station for 24 hours at a time. So they've been moving his schedule around, and he's shifted companies a couple of times anyway. So that made us move the podcast day to Wednesday. So right now, as it stands, our normal podcast day, when you can expect the podcast to be published, is on Wednesday evening, usually around midnight. So basically you could look for it Thursday morning if you're already asleep at that time. But we weren't able to do it.
Central time.
That's right. That's central. So we weren't able to do it on Wednesday. We have a new property where we are looking for arrowheads. So we spent a lot of time doing that yesterday instead of podcasting. So now we're here on our emergency backup podcast day Thursday, and the watcher was unable to join us because he's on a 24 right now. So as always, when we have a watchless show, we will be skating on the edge of untruth. Just keep that in mind.
We have hung our certificates of ignorance on the wall in front of ourselves.
That's right. Just remember that we don't know what we're talking about, ever. All right, without further ado, Space Weather News. from spaceweather.com. Exiting the solar wind, Earth is exiting a stream of solar wind that caused G1 class geomagnetic storms and auroras over both ends of our planet on July 9th and 10th. Solar wind speeds are currently near 500 kilometers per second and dropping. These values could still spark some high latitude auroras, but the light show, if any, should fully subside by July 12th. Also, auroras seen from the stratosphere. A solar wind stream hit Earth on July 9th and 10th. The view from the stratosphere was sublime, while the gaseous material from the sun was buffeting. Coffee!
Ah.
Coffee has arrived.
Oh, wow.
Just interrupt our our space weather news there for some coffee.
Perfect.
Shout out
Wait.
to Todd and Crystal Mulville for the French cat.
All right, thanks, Sonic.
yeah.
So why is it way over there?
Ow.
Sorry.
That's nice and hot.
All right, thank you.
One of them is 2 minutes hotter than the other.
Oh. Ow.
Here's a napkin.
Thank you.
A napkin for coffee. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, my dear.
You're welcome.
Yes.
That is some good coffee. Yes, we are doing this very late, ladies and gentlemen. I got off work very late today. So, where was I? While the gaseous material from the sun was buffeting our planet's magnetic field, Ian Griffin photographed an outburst of auroras from NASA's Stratospheric Observatory for Infrared Astronomy, or SOFIA, who we know.
Yes.
A specially modified Boeing 747 aircraft that can skim the bottom of the stratosphere for crystal clear views of the heavens. Wow, look at that. That's really cool. It's below.
Yep. Definitely looks like Baphomet.
Yeah. It's right there. It's below them.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. It was the best Aurora adventure ever, says Griffin. His name is Griffin. He's flying in the sky, taking pictures of it. Yeah. I was lucky to be a guest on board Sophia, which is presently flying out of Christchurch, New Zealand, during its annual trip to view the southern sky during austral winter. Last night, for almost the whole flight, the sky to the south was bathed by an amazing auroral display. Some of the forms were truly astonishing, and at times the aurora in the window was so bright it mesmerized all on board. The solar wind stream that caused the display came from a northern hole in the sun's atmosphere. Normally, such a stream might not be enough to spark spectacular auroras. This time, however, Earth's magnetosphere was already charged up by an unexpected CME impact on July 8th. The arrival of the solar wind stream only 1 day later tipped the magnetosphere into a state of glowing G1 class storminess. So, as it said, the solar wind speed right now is 485.7 kilometers per second, and the proton density is only 0.2 cubic centimeters.
No wonder it's been so hot.
Yeah.
I'm just attributing various things to the proton density.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm nailing it. Who knows?
Yeah. So speaking of Sophia, I did finally meet her. Right? You had talked about her before on the podcast, and then I show up to a party we're having, and she's there, and you guys introduced me.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, cool, this is Sophia. And then I suddenly realized that I couldn't remember if she was supposed to be the embodiment of all knowledge or the spawn of Satan. So I kind of got nervous. Sorry about that, Sophia. Based on what you had said, I was like, wait, which one is it? Which one is the right one?
Yeah, I don't remember what I was reading, but it was something about that the name meant Baphomet or something.
Yeah, Sophia knowledge or whatever, and it was like, but it was also turned into a bad thing.
Oh, yeah, that's right. And they were
it was trashing it religiously or something.
The Templars.
Yeah,
or something.
That's right. Yeah, so I got nervous because I couldn't remember which one it was supposed to be.
Yeah, that would be nerve-wracking.
Yeah, wait, embodiment of all knowledge or spawn of Satan?
If I get this wrong, I could die.
Yeah, I only have one chance at this. So yeah, Sophia, if you're listening, sorry about that. I couldn't tell which one. I couldn't remember which one Kyle said you were supposed to be. Okay, so I got a few listener communications here, just two that I want to read. This one came in over the website, and Kyle and I were talking about this before the show. Excuse me. So this came in as a comment on episode 103, and I'm just going to try to read this. It's very strange. From Anonymous. Been around to hear your stories over the last couple of months. in parentheses, just heard a voice say, in quotations, "Am I not entertained?" New paragraph. Oh, yes, I am. No punctuation throughout all this. I think that only you serpents can help me now. New paragraph. The mystery of the red and green tiny crystal flashes of colors dancing around me, ... New paragraph. Sometimes when I look away from something, it moves and then moves back to the same place as I look back at it. So I say this to you two snakes of the CIA underground. If you came here on a stony piece of olivine from the orbit between Mars and Jupiter just to loll at me, so that in my head, new paragraph. I think, quote, peridatites are important rocks, unquote, because of chromite. New paragraph. Quote, why are you snakes worth the salt? Question mark. New paragraph. You know, like 100 times last show. New paragraph. Love you guys. MJ Dundee.
I love it.
Yeah. It's cool, bro. I don't know what you're talking about, but you seem to be having a good time.
Thanks for the support.
Yeah. I think he was saying that he likes the podcast. I'm pretty sure that's what was happening.
I guess we are lolling at everybody.
Yeah.
We laugh a
Maybe
lot.
that's what it is. That's what he was saying. You're just lolling at every yeah. You came on a piece of olivine from the orbit between Mars and Jupiter just to loll at me.
That's right.
It's just funny. It's like, and then he's like, so it's like just to loll at me, ... So that in my head, new paragraph. I don't know what he's talking about. All right. I have one what is it called? A review on iTunes, which, by the way, we appreciate all the reviews. You guys are really racking the reviews up. Thank you so much for that.
Yep.
And remember, anytime you leave us, if you leave a review and you leave a comment on there, I will read it on the show. Well, so far I haven't found one that I'm like, I can't read that on the show. So if you leave one like that, I'll probably say that and not
You
read it
can
on the
try to make those.
show. Yeah.
That we
Go
can't
for
read
it.
on the show.
We'll read them to each other and laugh. But if you make one that is obviously not going to be read on the show, it won't be read on the show. So anyway, this one from the Nighthawk. Spectacular, he says. This is a fabulous podcast. The Snake Bros have a real understanding and deep passion for these subjects. The interviews are lively and informative. I am investing the time to listen through the entire back catalog. Once bitten, you'll be back for more.
I like it.
Yeah. Thank you so much. 1 star.
Thanks.
You got any news stories for us today?
No.
No?
Man, I had a rough week, folks.
Yeah. Week's been rough.
It was a long week, super early mornings, planting vines, very hot.
Yeah.
Studio's been in shambles. New property work, no cell service, lots of driving.
Yep. All of this is true.
On the phone a lot. So I haven't had anything to deep dive into, and haven't had a whole lot of time to listen to audiobooks or otherwise gain information for subject matter.
Yeah. Well, I have a string of articles that we can go through, all of them unvetted, so this will be great.
Yeah. I'm down.
Yeah.
I have a bunch of disjointed thoughts.
Yeah, I have some of those
I have these short periods of time where something will spark my imagination and I'll start going down this tiny it's like an ant hole, not a rabbit hole.
Right.
I get down there a little ways. But don't really have time to go deep.
Yeah. Well, let's try this one from mysteriousuniverse.org by Brent Swanser. This is a bizarre anomalous zone in the wilds of Russia. I always like stuff like this. So there are places in this world that, for whatever reasons, strange phenomena and mysteries seem to gravitate toward. These are places that exist in a realm somewhere in between what we know and what we can only guess at. and one of these supposedly lies out in the Badlands of Russia. Sprawled out across a vast expanse of remote wilderness in Russia, just about 600 miles east of Moscow, are the Perm region and the Sverdlovsk. Sverdlovsk?
Yeah, it's Sverdlovsk.
Yeah.
That sounds right.
Sverdlovsk. It's got a V in there at the end. Sverdlovsk.
Yeah.
Sverdlovsk. Okay. Sverdlovsk regions, and here buried within this sea of trees is a 45 square kilometer area of densely forested land near where the Silva and Molibka rivers merge, and not far from the village of Molibka that has long been a place full of strangeness and wonder, and which has come to be called the Triangle Molebsky, the Perm Anomalous Zone, or simply the M Zone, and has become a hotspot for all manner of high strangeness. The native Mansi people once considered this a very sacred place and long regarded it as a realm of spirits and gods. And locals and visitors alike have over the centuries reported a wide variety of strange phenomena from here, such as mysterious lights in the sky, luminous, translucent beings that stalk through the woods, dark figures, strange colored lightning, weather anomalies, and the sounds of disembodied voices or singing. Compasses don't work here, and electrical equipment is prone to stop working as well, and cell phones go dead. Witnesses have even talked of how watches will sometimes begin to spin backwards in the zone.
Wow. What kind of watches?
I guess if they're spinning, they're probably the old spring-driven. But yeah, that's a good question. Like, would a digital watch start going backwards because of some weird crystal?
Yeah,
thing
it seems
happening?
like it seemed more likely that it would be a digital.
He said spin, so I'm assuming it's like talking about hands here.
Yeah.
Which would be a spring-driven watch usually. I mean, it gets to be about
odd.
Yeah. There are also the numerous physical effects experienced by those who come here, both positive and negative. It is not uncommon at all for people in the zone to be beset with fierce headaches, nosebleeds, nausea, dizziness, and muscle pain. They are also prone to visual and auroral hallucinations and powerful, inexplicable mood swings. There are also conversely, more favorable effects. For instance, it is thought that the area has healing abilities, and there are countless tales of people claiming to have been cured of all manner of ailments here. And even healthy people report feeling enhanced and improved somehow, gaining youthful vigor and emerging with increased intelligence. They also supposedly feel spiritually cleaned, with Russian ufologist Valery Yakimov saying of this, quote, "Healthy people feel the general improvement in all spheres, physical, mental, spiritual, moral, etc. It is necessary to mention the moral effects of M-Zone. The drawbacks of one's character seem to disappear here. The good intentions and high feelings come to life. One's soul becomes cleaner, higher, and calmer. You can almost feel yourself becoming a better person. Also, the creative effect of the M-Zone is quite noticeable. The abilities of people are sharpening there, and sometimes new talents and capacities unknown before begin to realize themselves."
Fantastic.
There are supposedly some spectacular cases of this in effect, such as the alleged case of the journalist and cosmonaut Pavel Murkatov, probably not saying that right, who had apparently once been a military dropout who had been forced to turn to journalism because of physical disabilities. He then decided to make a trip to the M-Zone to investigate its many odd tales for a possible story, making his way to the remote area with a group of others in an expedition. While in the region, Murkatov would claim that although he and his crew had fallen mysteriously ill at first, they were then overcome with an intense sense of well-being and found their heads filled with visions, emotions, and knowledge that forced into them that they could not explain. In Murkatov's case, he claimed that the knowledge he gleaned from that mystical place allowed him to shortly after recover from his disabilities and pass the test to enter the Soviet space program as a cosmonaut, and he would go on to largely credit his success with the mysterious effects and powers the Perm Anomalous Zone had bestowed upon him.
Wow.
So like a cosmonaut is saying that. That's pretty weird. By far, one of the most well-known of the many phenomena of the Perm Anomalous Zone is the unusually high concentration of UFO sightings here, and indeed it is considered by many to be one of the biggest UFO hotspots in the country. One of the most famous UFO-related incidents in the region supposedly happened in 1983 when Russian ufologist Emil Bachurin claimed to have seen a purple ball of light rise out of the thick forest to leave behind a patch of melted snow and ice measuring 206 feet across.
Wow.
Bachurin would also claim that he and his expedition had been chased by orbs of light through the trees that had burnt them with some sort of rays, with one of the team even completely knocked unconscious by one of the lights. Even more intriguing still is a case from 2005 when an expedition of ufologists from Yekaterinburg were in the zone and purportedly spotted a giant glowing ball above the trees. One of the expedition members would mysteriously go missing the following morning, and rather chillingly, a picture purportedly snapped of the UFO allegedly shows a beam of light extending from the object to this missing man. So what is going on here? The strange phenomena from the M zone is such that it has even managed to capture quite a lot of interest from outside of Russia. The American TV show Sightings did an investigation of the area, and apparently things got off to an odd start when the Russian government warned them that to stay any longer than 24 hours in the zone was very dangerous. So far, so strange, but when they began their investigation, it would all get even weirder still when their camp was apparently surrounded by encircling orbs of light. The locals of the area were also interviewed by the crew, and they confirmed that UFO sightings were a regular, almost mundane fact of life for them. With such a remote, strange part of the world hidden out away in this wild and rugged, exotic land, it is interesting to think about what could possibly be behind all of these stories. How can we explain all these disparate phenomena coming from this one patch of wilderness? Of course, other than the obvious theories that UFOs are drawn here for some reason, there are also other attempts to try to rationalize it. Considering that electromagnetic readings within the zone are amazingly high in some places, it is thought that this could be having some kind of physical effect, including hallucinations of perceived UFOs. Connecting to this is the idea that it could be the result of infrasound, which is subaudible sounds that have been shown to have a wide range of physical and psychological effects on human beings. So, are we dealing with UFOs and powers beyond our comprehension or mundane phenomena that can be explained? It doesn't seem settled yet, and it would seem to be the only way to find out for yourself is to get out there and check it out.
And do some science.
That's right.
Man, that's really cool.
So there are places like that around the world, and I'm sort of fascinated by them. Like, I think of them just as anomalous places. Like, so you have anomalous, you have anomalous people, right? And you have anomalous sightings of things, entities, cryptids, whatever. And then there are just zones or areas that themselves are anomalous and where.
Yeah, recently I've been thinking a lot about writing, songwriting.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm in a sort of a lull, no writing, not much writing.
Yeah.
And there have been periods of time when, I did a lot of writing. And a lot of that is just the discipline of, or maybe the time to really sit down and be alone and have like long expanses of time when you can work on something, as is, pretty much any art. But
Yeah.
I was thinking back early on when I used to write, when I first started writing, and the things that I would do and associated with the writing. A lot of it would happen at nighttime.
Yeah.
But another thing I would do is I would go hiking when we first got the property that we actually live on now.
Yeah.
I would go hiking way back in the hills and explore all this stuff. And I remember this one particular place that I found. It was on the side of a ravine, and there was this huge boulder that had fallen, on the side of the ravine, but it was sitting in a way that it had a flat top, and you could climb up on it and sit in there. And the trees all in the ravine were tall and had sort of a canopy.
Yeah.
It was just real beautiful and looking down into this steep descending ravine. So I find this place. I'm like, I got to come back here with my guitar. And I would do this many times, over and over, week after week or whatever. I would grab my guitar, just like when I had a moment, like, I'm going to go to that spot. I'd grab the guitar, take the four-wheeler or whatever, as far as I could get, and then hike with a book, a pen, and a guitar. No phone, no way to distract. We didn't even have cell phones at the time.
Yeah.
But I wrote a lot of songs sitting on that rock.
Yeah.
So I wonder if there are, and there were multiple places like that here. There was another ravine that had like a dry waterfall that I used to sit on top of and write.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking maybe there's small places that have interesting effects that are obviously less than this one. Like that one's got a major thing going on with electromagnetism, but there's probably all types of different fluctuations just as you move across the any landscape.
Yeah.
In various different forces or
But I
energy
wonder
levels.
if those things, because like what you're talking about, there is like geology associated with it too, right? So in this, there's no mention of like what is the landscape like. It's just like, okay, there's trees and stuff.
Yeah, there's 3 rivers that make
Yeah.
that sort of distinguish this landscape from the rest.
Right. But like the ancients at some point realized that
The journalist just wasn't into geology, man.
yeah. Right. And the ufologists
They were really
not
into Russian names, though.
yeah, there were a lot of Russian names in that story. Well, what I'm getting at, I guess, is that, so the ancients they began to build these places that had these effects on people.
Exactly.
So what I'm wondering is there something in the geometry?
Yeah.
So you sit on that rock and you've got a ravine, or are you sitting on the waterfall and so is there something about the geometry of the area, even though it's wild, there's sort of an intrinsic, some kind of sacred geometry involved that sort of gives you this cathedral-esque feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. It definitely gives a feeling, because before I even played any music or anything, I'd get there and just be like, whoa.
Yeah.
And a lot of it was the way it looked.
Yeah.
But there's a feeling associated with it.
Yeah.
And sort of I don't know how to describe it.
Yeah, it's a sacred spot. There's like an essence of the place.
Yes.
And there's something about it, and you can feel it
Yeah.
when you get there. Yeah. I know how that is.
There's many places around this before, because where we live is a subdivision, and each tract is 10 acres plus.
Yeah.
And so it's a large area. And before there were any houses or any development in all those different tracts, I would hike all around and explore them.
Yeah.
And there's many different spots that were just like, wow, this is special. And I would sit up there and write.
Yeah.
So I was thinking, I need to go do that again.
Yeah.
It was very effective.
Yeah. Well, and there's something about there's even a little bit of the quest in that too. Like you have to go there. You have to sort of,
Yeah.
you have to set up you have to get ready, and you have to go out on this journey
Right.
to get there in the first
It's
place.
the whole thing.
Right.
Is part of it.
Right.
But the place
It's sort of remote, and you have to
Yeah.
struggle to get there. And then when you finally get there, you're like, oh, yes, this is awesome.
yeah.
And it's a combination of how it looks and how that affects your mind, and maybe even some sacred geometry involved in the landscape.
Yep. And in order to do that now, I'd have to go far away. I can't just go traipsing off into the woods nearby, because even if I did find a place, I know that there's a neighbor not too far away, and I'll be like, working on some crappy song. There's no way you can do it. You can't get your psyche to forget that there's people over there going, what the hell is that coming off that hill? So I got to find me a new place, a new magical place to go.
But is it so, like, obviously the wildlife is involved in this, and I've seen I have a collection of pictures on my computer of trees that are in places that have anomalous magnetics, and the trees are all twisted and very strange looking.
Yeah.
And so, like, it's almost like the magnetic field being screwed up there, or not screwed up, but just like very tangled there, affects their ability to sort of grow in the phi, state.
Yeah.
Right. And so I'm wondering if, like, even that has something to do with it. Like if the magnetic field is powerful and very stable and strong in some places, then all the trees are perfect in terms of phi, and that also gives you that cathedral, because then you have the pillars and the and the flying buttresses and the very high up stuff. And whereas in other places you're like, oh my God, this place is evil, because everything's like, the trees are just like, they look like, something out of old fairy tales or whatever. And they got big mouths and red eyes, and they're reaching out for you as you're walking down the path.
Yeah. That's where you write death metal.
That's right.
But you just made me realize something else.
That's where you write,
That's right. You just made me realize something else, though. A painter will go to a place, a special place in the woods.
Yeah.
Or on a landscape, and paint, his or her idea of what they're looking at, right?
Yeah.
So they're making a representation of the feeling and what they're seeing, the aura of the place in the painting. And you can do the same thing with lyrics. You're sitting there and you're observing this place, and you can use bits and pieces of it as similes or metaphors to other things. And that's kind of cool. I didn't realize that. I mean, I did that.
Yeah.
But this is what I'm doing now. I'm trying to think what were all these activities that I did and techniques.
Yeah.
I just haven't done any of that in a long time.
Just don't do it like Picasso, because I look at his and I'm like, what the fuck? The guy, what the hell was that guy looking at? I mean, I know he's like.
I'm trying to come up with an example on the fly, but it's not gonna happen. We gotta take a break. I'll think of something.
Yeah, we'll take a break and come back. I got a bunch more unvetted articles to read.
Got some lyrics about snakes.
Snakes!
Órale, chicos y vatos. Bienvenido a Hermanos de la Serpiente podcast. En la 10 por 10 por 10 cubo tangente de ciencia. As for you, Raul.
All right.
Raul and I are starting a new company. It's called Dos Vatos Locos. We're going to go run people's vineyards and orchards. Just two guys.
That's crazy. Yeah.
I told him today, I was like, we should just start a business called Dos Vatos. He goes, Dos Vatos Locos. So that's what we're going to do.
You got him to teach you how to say that whole thing in Spanish?
No.
Oh,
I figured it out on my drive home.
okay.
That's the only deep dive I did.
Okay. Make sure he listens to that.
It's probably not right.
Sounded good to me.
I did my best.
All right, this is from ancientorigins.net. So ancient-origins.net is a great website. This is by Anthony Sinclair. I think that's the name of the author. I think that's the byline. So it is titled 210,000-year-old Homo sapien skull from Greece is oldest outside of Africa.
A new one. Wait, how old is this story?
This is posted on July 10th.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah. I think this skull has been the one that's been contentious for many years.
Okay.
But let's find out. I haven't read the story at all. 210,000-year-old human skull could provide new evidence that our species left Africa much earlier than previously thought. A new study published in Nature of two fossils found in Greece in the 1970s. So yeah.
Wow.
Shows that one of them is the oldest Homo sapien specimen ever found outside of Africa by more than 50,000 years. This exciting discovery adds to a list of recent finds that shows the story of humanity's spread across the world and interaction with other related species is much more complicated than we once thought. This human skull was one of two cranial fossils found in the Apodema Cave, one of a series of cave sites along the southwestern coast of the Peloponnese in Greece. I hope I said that right. The first, known as Apodema 1, comprised half of the rear of a skull case. Apodema 2 was a largely complete skull with a clear face, but had been heavily distorted during the fossilization process. Both were initially identified as Neanderthals and as uncontroversial specimens, disappeared into the general table of fossils from humans and their closest extinct relatives. But the recent study from a multinational team led by Katerina Harvati reconstructed the specimens digitally and dated them by measuring their radioactive decay. So it's geometric morphometric. analysis allowed the researchers to reverse model the distortions of Apidemia 2 to estimate what it would have originally looked like, and this confirmed that it was early Neanderthal dating from around 150,000 years ago. They also digitally recreated what the hull of the Apidemia 1 skull would have looked like and realized it was more likely a modern human or Homo sapiens, dating it to 210,000 years ago.
Wow.
So human evolution is thought of as a linear story of new species developing and replacing older, simpler ones. This narrative originally said that modern humans in the southern Cape of Africa developed a suite of original ways of thinking and communicating approximately 80,000 years ago. They dispersed out of Africa and across the world, sweeping all before them from about 70,000 years ago, leading to the demise of the Neanderthals in Europe about 40,000 years ago. But this narrative has grown ever more difficult to sustain because of a range of new fossil discoveries, improvements in their dating and genetic evidence. We now know that modern humans have existed for at least 300,000 years thanks to a fossil from the site of Jebel Irhoud in Morocco. But they didn't form a single population with a coherent pattern of behavior before they left the continent. Specimens from sites in the Levant, which is modern-day Israel, Syria, Lebanon, and Jordan, suggest the first wave of modern humans out of Africa were replaced by Neanderthals before the final, more successful human migration later on. Right? So first Homo sapiens comes out, and then Neanderthals kick their asses, and then another wave of Homo sapiens comes out and wins. This is the
something that they said just previous to that doesn't make any sense to me. Like there wasn't a coherent group of them before they left.
Yeah, so it says narrative has grown ever more difficult to sustain. We now know that modern humans have existed for at least 200,000 years, but they didn't form a single population with a coherent pattern of behavior before they left the continent.
Which is weird because if they sort of developed on this continent, it seems that the pattern of behavior would develop there.
Yeah.
If they're leaving, they're sort of dispersing, they're spreading out. How do you get a coherent?
Yeah, like it was a single culture or something. You know, I think that's what they're talking about. You're right. That is a little confusing.
That was just strange. But anyway,
so
moving on.
In southern Africa, modern humans were alive at the same time as a much smaller and seemingly more primitive species called Homo naledi. Genetic evidence from Siberia and recently Tibet has identified a new hominid species, the Denisovans, that shared a history of interbreeding and interaction with Neanderthals. And the presence of Neanderthal DNA in our own genome shown that they also bred with our species. So, growing complexity. The new data from Apidemia further extends this complex picture of modern human dispersal and interaction with other hominin species. For example, the earlier human skull came from a time when the surrounding environment was warmer and wetter than the cold and arid conditions the later Neanderthal specimen would have lived in. 140,000 years later. This emphasizes that our explanations for population dispersals need to take into account the context of major environmental change and the opportunities and challenges that went with it. Our traditional narratives and implicit assumptions of the evolutionary history of modern humans are well and truly broken. The ever-increasing complexity of the evidence we now have means there is no simple reason for hominin dispersal or replacement. We now need a renewed emphasis on the archaeological evidence to understand and compare what hominins were actually doing in the landscapes where we find their remains. This will enable us to explore the nature of their interactions and not just narrate the consequences. So this paper just recently came out. So this article is just basically saying, so now the story is really busted. This linear development idea. And see, the thing is, we've talked about this skull before. What?
I was looking for a celebratory button that I could push here, but I couldn't find one. You know, like a song that you party to.
Oh, yeah.
Like you do the happy dance.
Yeah,
but
it needs to be like a,
Theory is busted. Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, we need a jingle for that.
Yeah, we do.
The destruction of the standard model.
That's right.
Jingle.
Yeah, I think of like a victory march. Or
That's
something.
what I. Yeah.
So yeah, we've discussed this skull before, and it has been I mean, Ancient Origins has older articles about this same skull where basically the people are complaining that it's been sidelined, for so long. It's just been sitting in the basements of museums. No one's paying attention to it. And it's really good evidence and now pretty concrete evidence that Homo sapiens were out of Africa long before the Standard Model says they were.
Yeah. So how long is it going to take for that one fact to disseminate all through all of the
Well, it got published in
all
Nature.
the textbooks?
Well, yeah, textbooks, I don't know, but it got published in Nature, so that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah. But I mean, now they have to. What are they going to do with the story? You know what I'm saying? I just don't think the story's going to get dropped
Right. Yeah.
right away.
It's not.
I can imagine it's going to take a while.
But that's pretty. One of the reasons they didn't like it was because if Skull 1 was a Homo sapien, then it's so much older than the Neanderthal skull that they found there.
Yeah.
They don't like that because again.
So how old are the oldest Neanderthal skulls?
That's a good question. I don't know. But you're not supposed to have a successive of evolutionary species living side by side, at least not for that long of a period. You know what I mean? Like, in other words, if we evolved from Neanderthals, which obviously is not the case at this point, if we evolved from the Neanderthals, then you can't really have Homo sapiens and Neanderthals living for 100,000 years together.
Yeah.
And it seems quick, too. That whole thing seems very fast. Like, that stuff is happening quickly.
Like, there was one mutation that changed from Neanderthal to Homo sapien, Homo sape, and suddenly there was a whole bunch of the Homo sapien.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just doesn't make sense. It seems like it should be a slow progression.
Yeah.
And where are all of the in-between pieces? That's always been my biggest thing with evolution.
Yeah.
Like, where we should
Where's the guy that was part Neanderthal, part Homo sape? Is that what you're saying?
where there should be a lot of different ones all the way through.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not evolution if it's abrupt changes,
Right.
is it? I mean, that's not that's not the idea.
Well, I mean, like, no. I mean, like, you should have abrupt, tiny changes.
Yeah,
Which would result in, like, a gradual macro change.
That's
Is
what I
that what
mean,
you're
yeah.
talking about? Yeah. But you shouldn't have just suddenly you have a whole new species that has all this different phenotypes and morphology, and which is what, I mean, like, if you look at genetic comparisons between Homo sape and Neanderthal, we're very, 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 very close genetically. But you still have a difference of like many millions and millions of base pairs. That's a lot of data. And all those base pairs have to change and become functional. They have to change and change in a way that's functional for whatever organism it is, right? So, like, for example, like commonly said, because I don't know the difference between Homo sapien and Neanderthal, but I know that they say that, genetically there's only a 2% difference between humans and chimpanzees, for example.
Right.
But that's 60 million base pairs.
yeah,
So if you think about that, every one of those 60 million base pairs has to change into something else and remain viable and make it so that the organism that has them is not just going to fall apart.
yeah,
So in the like old school sort of Darwinian or accidental evolutionary model, each one of those changes would have to be some kind of by chance mutation that would take place and then become viable because it was and then it would propagate because it was an improvement of some kind. Right. And then you have to have that happen 60 million times, basically.
Yeah.
Technically, I'm sure that's not
or
exactly correct.
You could have a bunch of them happen at once, and then that remains viable. And
Right,
So,
so you have a whole
in
section
that
of-
one.
yeah.
More happen.
Yeah.
But it seems like all of them would be like, if it's happening with offspring, not the living being, but the offspring. Is that the idea?
Yeah.
So in other words, you come out one way, you don't change while you're alive. It's your offspring that have something changed.
Right. The mutation
Correct?
happens.
Is that that the idea?
Mutation happens during, or because, or like due to, or during like conception,
Development
or in utero or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
So you can imagine that all of the offspring of all of these things are changing in different ways.
Yeah.
And so then a changed one comes out, and it's viable, and then that one reproduces with not a changed one, a regular
right,
one.
Yeah,
So
you're not
it's
gonna have two changed ones that can somehow reproduce with each other. Yeah,
that are the same changes.
yeah,
But you would have two. You could have two that are changed in different ways that then reproduce with each other.
Yeah.
But it just seems like if that was the case, that would be happening all the time. Why would it? Why wouldn't we notice that today in all? Like, what are those worms that they've completely?
like robo slugs.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of this worm. It's like the most simple organism.
Planarian worm? No, those aren't simple.
It's It's not the most simple organism. It's the most simple one that has like a neural network.
No, is it the guy with the 6 legs?
I don't know. It's really simple. It's
Yeah.
a worm, and they've completely mapped its entire neural network. It's got like 300 neurons or something like
Okay.
that. And they can study its behavior and
Yeah.
see what all the things that are firing that are making it do whatever it's doing.
Yeah.
It seems like you would be able to see that thing reproducing and having all these changes happening.
Yeah.
Or any type of organism that reproduces really often.
Yeah.
That you should be able to see the process happening.
Yeah. And there is some adaptation that they have seen. Like there's often a study cited with a bottle fly or something like that where they've done that because you can get a fly to reproduce really quickly, right?
Yeah.
And you can see changes that happen into it that are adaptations, like slight changes in size of the eyes that carries on through the generations
Okay.
or whatever. But that isn't speciation, and that's the problem, you know?
Yeah.
Homo sapien, Neanderthal, 2 different species.
Yeah.
It's not like Homo sapien, just Neanderthal with bigger eyes. You know?
Yeah.
Like, there's a whole lot of stuff different, even if they're very small. Based, you know, if you just looked at them, you would say, okay, that guy is like much shorter and much wider and has a totally, you know. But when you really start paying attention, you see that the whole muscular structure is vastly different. Now, they may have all this, they may have the same number of muscles that we do, and they're all basically in the same place, but they're all of different shape, and they have, you know, and the closer you look, the more complex the changes become to the point to where there's enormous amounts of change. And then, of course,
Yeah.
you can see it just in the skeletal structure, that they're not the same as us, and there's all this morphology that's totally different, and there's a lot of genetic data that has to be different for that to happen. So
If it is an evolution, what is happening? I mean, what the hell is going on?
I don't know. Like, one of the interesting adaptations or whatever it is that you would call it is it happens in. It's very easy to see in a progression of Megalodon teeth, right? Megalodon is like that dinosaur shark thing. Yeah. So they start out, the oldest Megalodon teeth are just enormous shark teeth, you know. But as you go, as you progress through time and you get closer to, you get younger and younger teeth, they become serrated. Now, that isn't a big change, but it is in one way. It doesn't make it a different species, but suddenly they now have serrated teeth, and that is, you could see how that might be like he would be better suited over long periods of time to getting his prey, right? Because every bite is going to be worse and different and would be more likely to kill his prey.
Right.
You know, like even if he only gets one bite off, then he has the whole, like, because he's got particles of stuff because his teeth are serrated now.
Yeah.
And it's a toxic bite.
Yeah, septic bite.
Yeah, septic bite or
you
whatever.
Have a septic bite in seawater? I don't know about that. Maybe you can.
Yeah. There's a lot of fluoride in seawater. It keeps the teeth clean. But yeah, that's what I'm saying. Just like, so is that a different species? No. You know?
Yeah.
He just has he has serrated teeth, but you see it over time. It happens. It's very clear. Now, that's an adaptation, you know? But still, there's a lot of genetic information that has to change in order for those teeth to become serrated and then stay that way.
Yeah. Maybe I'm biased, but it seems kind of boring. It's too quaint
Yeah.
that it would just be this gradual thing over time.
Right. But
It's
that's
more interesting to me that there's some weird thing that happens occasionally that just suddenly causes
Yeah.
new life forms.
Well, I think it may
come
be
to whatever.
Yeah, my most recent working hypothesis on this is that it's the same as geological change. During long, stable periods, there is very slow, like 1 grain of sand, 1 drop of water, except that this time it's like 1 base pair, one tiny mutation at a time. But then there are enormous cataclysmic periods, and then during that period, we also have enormous evolutionary changes that are happening as well. And those may all be connected in some way.
Yeah, that's really cool to think of.
Because it looks like that for sure. You know, you get a huge wipeout of species, and then suddenly there's an explosion of entirely new ones out of nowhere. And you're like, wait a minute, what did they evolve from after everything just died?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, you basically got wiped all the way back to like amoebas, and then suddenly you have ferns and they're entirely new kinds of ferns and fishes and crustaceans and stuff, like the Permian extinction and then the Cambrian explosion.
That's a great name. Cambrian explosion?
Yeah. Yeah.
Future band name.
Yeah, the Cambrian explosion event.
I don't know, man. I miss the Neanderthals. Wish they were still around.
Yeah. Do you think that they exist in our folklore about dwarves?
Yeah, I mean, well, that would be
The hill people?
Floresienses or whatever they are.
Well, those would be hobbits. Those are the hobbits.
Okay.
The Neanderthals are the dwarves. They're like 4 or 5 feet tall and 4 or 5 feet wide. And they live underground, and they're just like carrying giant, and my axe, right? Those kind of guys.
Yeah.
Just freaking enormous beards. And the women also have enormous beards.
Yes.
They're all no dwarf women. But yeah, I don't know. I think that I wish we had the Watcher here to talk to us about base pairs and stuff, because he knows a lot more about this than I do.
Yeah. What a loser.
He's out there saving lives. What a freaking loser. Instead of doing the podcast with us. God, that guy. You
guys gotta send him a 1 down box.
Yeah, he's on Twitter. Follow him on Twitter and tell him he's dumb for not doing the 104
He
with
should
us.
be doing the podcast in the ambulance.
Yeah. That would be great.
No, you guys are wrong.
All right, so keeping in that vein, I have another Ancient Origins article here, ancient-origins.net. This one's by Alicia McDermott, also posted on July 11th. This one's called The March of the Denisovans. Evidence of archaic human gene now detected in the Orient. The Denisovan story keeps evolving. This group of ancient hominids has been something of a mystery ever since they were first discovered in 2010 as an extinct sister group to the Neanderthals. Sister group. No brothers.
Well, you got a problem with that?
All the Denisovans were chicks.
You got a problem with that, man?
No. Just, it's weird. I mean, why can't they just be an extinct...
Why is that weird, man?
Why can't they just be an extinct group? I mean, it would be weird if it said brother group, too.
Yeah,
It's
you're right.
strange. Bits and pieces of their tale keep coming to light, and almost everything is a surprise that makes international headlines. And, of course, many people want to know more about the results of the mating of Denisovan and other hominid species. Of particular interest is how Denisovan DNA has lived on in our species. The latest in Denisovan-related discoveries comes from an analysis of a 160,000-year-old archaic human molar fossil that was discovered decades ago in China. So here we have like a decades-old discovery, and now they're finding out,
Yeah, it's like forbidden archaeology.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
I mean, come on, that skull was in the 1970s.
Yeah.
You know, it's probably in his.
It probably is, yeah.
Why can't I think of his name?
Michael Cremo.
Michael Cremo's book.
Yeah. Science Daily reports that the study, quote, offers the first morphological evidence of interbreeding between archaic humans and Homo sapiens in Asia, unquote. Science Daily explains that the study, which is published in the journal Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, this is another enormous one, is focused on a, quote, 3-rooted lower molar, a rare trait primarily found in modern Asians that was previously thought to have evolved after H. sapiens dispersed from Africa, unquote. So they have a picture of how it has 3 roots.
Oh, yeah.
The traits present to the fossil suggests both that it is older than previously understood and that some modern Asian groups obtained the trait through interbreeding with the sister group of Neanderthals, the Denisovans, explains Shara Bailey, a professor of anthropology at New York University and the paper's lead author in a New York University's press release. In a previous study, which was published in Nature in May of this year, Bailey and her colleagues concluded that Denisovans were inhabiting the Tibetan Plateau well before Homo sapiens migrated to the region. That work, along with the new PNAS analysis, focused on a hominid lower mandible found on the Tibetan Plateau and Baishia Karst Cave in Xiahe, I'm probably saying that wrong, China in 1980. Yeah, so... It was also an important discovery because it is the first time researchers have identified the physical remains of a Denisovan outside the cave that gave them their name, Denisova Cave in Siberia. The Denisovan jaw also has an interesting discovery story. An anonymous monk found the prehistoric hominid jaw fragment and then gifted it to the 6th Gun Tang living Buddha, who later gave it to I don't know how to say these Chinese words. Lanzhou University. The jaw sat in the university collection for 30 plus years before the study co-author, Dongzhu Zhang of Lanzhou University, decided it was worth a look in 2016. Heavy carbonate crust was attached to the mandible, and U-series dating told researchers that the jaw is at least 160,000 years old. According to a press release by the Max Planck Institute, this is the earliest hominid fossil found to date on the Tibetan Plateau, and that means that the people living in the area had already adapted to living in this high-altitude, low-oxygen environment long before Homo sapiens even arrived in the region. And I wonder if it was, let's say, 160,000 years, I guess. I wonder how much lower the oceans were then, so it maybe have been even 400 feet higher above sea level than it is now. However, as National Geographic notes, while the jaw was found where oxygen levels are low, without the DNA itself, scientists can't be sure the jaw's owner carried the adaptation to survive in that thin air. The same jaw has now been analyzed by New York University anthropologists Susan Anton and Jean-Jacques Hublin, director of the Department of Human Evolution at the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology. Their study centered on the molar and was focused on exploring what it can tell us about the relationship between archaic humans who occupied Asia more than 160,000 years ago and modern Asians, as the press release states. Bailey says that the results of the study show that, quote, in Asia, there have long been claims for continuity between archaic and modern humans because of some shared traits. But many of those traits are primitive or are not unique to Asians. However, the 3-rooted lower molar trait is unique to Asian groups. Its presence in a 160,000-year-old archaic human in Asia strongly suggests the trait was transferred to H. sapiens in the region through interbreeding with archaic humans in Asia. So there's been quite a lot of interest in the Denisovans mating with other hominid groups lately. Another recent study shows that their genes live on in populations in the Philippines and New Guinea, to China and Tibet, where people have inherited 3 to 5% of their DNA from Denisovans. Wow. Even more exciting is that the genes had only entered the human genome as late as 15,000 years ago, suggesting modern humans and Denisovans were mating. And as Adra Collins has stated, moreover, that it was from them that these modern human groups inherited roughly 400 genes, including an immune gene variant, TNFAIP3, and a gene involved in diet, WDFY2. And that's not all. For some time now, researchers have supposed that the Denisovans were mating with Neanderthals. Proof for their offspring came in 2018 when a genetic analysis of a bone fragment found in a Denisova cave was shown to have the DNA of a Denisovan mother and a Neanderthal father. Svante Apabo, director of the Department of Evolutionary Genetics at the MPI-EVA and lead author of that study, said, Neanderthals and Denisovans may not have had many opportunities to meet, but when they did, they must have mated frequently, much more so than we previously thought. Man, I wanted to change that quote. When they did, they drank Dos Equis.
So, Homo sapiens are now 200 and something thousand years old.
300.
Outside of Africa.
Yeah.
200 and something thousand years ago.
210 to 300,000.
And their genes or Denisovan genes show up in the Homo sapiens 15,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. And this tooth and jawbone are basically 160,000 years old dated.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to get the numbers together. I'm like, it still seems like there's something weird going on with the dating to me.
And I don't understand at all the DNA sequencing stuff. Like, I'm trying.
No one does.
I mean, reading Graham's book, America Before, he goes through in detail all of this stuff about the sequencing, and I'm just like, I don't get it. I don't understand at all what is happening here.
Yeah, and they start talking about haplogroups and stuff like that, and you're just
Yeah.
like, okay.
And they're like, so obviously these ones came down from through here this way. And you're like, how do you know that?
Yeah.
By whatever you're talking about there, which I don't understand either.
Yeah. Well, we got to take a break. Let's think about that, and we'll come back after the break. And
Maybe
talk about
that's
it a
what I
little
should
more.
do a deep dive into next, is trying to understand, trying to get a grasp on at least the basics of.
Yeah.
Graham seems to have a sort of basic grasp of what, or
Yeah.
maybe he just, I don't know. Maybe he's just
Quoting the scholars.
quoting stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's really tough, but twisted snakes. They're really difficult to figure out.
Yeah.